A mud-stained suitcase lay abandoned in the middle of the dense forest. The night in the outskirts of Auckland, New Zealand, was eerily silent. Only the faint chirping of insects and the rustling of leaves in the cold wind could be heard. Flashlights swept through the trees, casting flickering beams of light onto the tense, weary faces of the investigators. The suitcase had been hastily buried beneath a thin layer of soil at the edge of a forest path, a clear sign that someone had tried to hide something unspeakable. After days of relentless searching, they had finally found it. When the lid of the suitcase was opened, a suffocating, haunting smell filled the cramped space inside. The body of a young British woman was curled up tightly within. Bruises mottled her neck, shoulders, and arms. Her pale face still seemed frozen in a look of sheer terror. Everyone fell silent. Only the trembling beam of the flashlight illuminated the lifeless form. In that instant, they knew it was Grace Millane, the British backpacker who had gone missing exactly 1 week earlier. The night wind howled through the forest, cold as a lament for Grace's tragic fate. She had come to New Zealand with dreams of seeing the world. Her radiant smile captured in photos on Instagram, snapshots of her journey across South America, Asia, and now, the land of mountains and turquoise lakes. But the trip meant to celebrate her 22nd birthday, just a fleeting milestone in her world adventure, had ended in a way no one could ever have imagined. And you, where are you listening to this story from? A quiet afternoon in the bustle of the city, or a late night when the only light outside your window flickers faintly against the glass? Have you ever thought that a simple date, born from a moment of kindness and curiosity, could be the beginning of a nightmare? Do you trust in the safety of strangers? Have you ever felt that sudden chill deep inside when you looked into someone's eyes? Eyes that seemed harmless, yet made your heart tighten for no reason. Tell me, deep down, would you recognize a monster if it smiled at you? Grace Millane, who was she? The unfortunate young woman was born and raised in the quiet suburbs of Essex, England. Her full name was Grace Emmy Rose Millane. Born on the 2nd of December 1996, the youngest and only daughter of David and Gillian Millane. Above her were 2 older brothers, Michael and Declan, who always called her the little princess of the family, loved, protected, and cherished beyond measure. The Millane family remembered Grace as a girl with long, shiny brown hair, a bright smile, and a warm, compassionate heart. From a young age, she had been full of energy and enthusiasm, an active member of her school's field hockey team, and someone who loved sports, friendship, and laughter. Her friends described her as sociable, kind, and endlessly positive, a person who could light up any room just by walking in. Her father, David, once said in an interview, "She was the sunshine of our family." No matter what was going on, Grace always knew how to make everyone smile. During her university years, Grace studied advertising and marketing at the University of Lincoln. She wasn't just a good student. She also devoted herself to volunteering and community work, believing that life should be about sharing, exploring, and kindness. Just before graduation, Grace began planning a trip around the world, a gift to herself after years of hard work. Her family fully supported the idea. They knew Grace was brave, independent, and capable of handling herself in any situation. Before she left, she did something that deeply moved everyone who knew her. She cut off her long hair, her signature look, and donated it to a charity that made wigs for cancer patients. A small gesture, yet one that beautifully reflected her generosity and empathy. With a heart full of excitement and a spirit made for adventure, Grace set off on her world journey in October 2018. Her first stop was South America. She visited Peru, explored Machu Picchu, and snapped cheerful selfies with llamas on the Andes Mountains. Every day brought a new experience, and Grace shared each moment on Instagram, a digital diary of her wanderlust-filled life. After nearly 2 months of travel, Grace decided to spend some time in New Zealand, the land of the Kiwis, famous for its breathtaking landscapes and friendly people. On the 20th of November 2018, Grace Millane arrived in Auckland, beginning a new chapter of her adventure. She planned to stay a few weeks to explore New Zealand's North Island before continuing her journey across Asia. During her first 10 days, Grace joined a group tour, traveling with new friends to the far north, visiting Cape Reinga, the Bay of Islands, and many of the country's most stunning coastal spots. On social media, Grace continued to share photos of her travels. Her radiant smile under golden sunlight, a backpack slung over her shoulders, her hair caught in the ocean breeze. Surrounded by fellow travelers from all corners of the world. At 21 years old, she was living fully, believing the world outside was vast, kind, and endlessly worth discovering. No one could have imagined that only a few weeks later, the very country she called her dream destination would become the place where her life would come to a tragic end. The story begins on the late evening of the 1st of December 2018, inside a high-rise hotel in central Auckland. Grace Millane stepped into the elevator alongside a stranger. The hotel's CCTV camera at City Life Auckland captured that fleeting moment. The two one-year-olds smiled brightly, dressed in a simple black dress and light high heels, confident, excited for her evening out. Next to her stood a tall young man wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He appeared friendly, chatting casually with Grace as the elevator doors closed. They had just met for the first time through Tinder, a casual date, or at least that's what Grace believed. The pair visited a few bars in the city center, shared cocktails, and laughed together, before deciding to return to the man's hotel room. Grace didn't know it yet, but the moment she followed him beyond those elevator doors was the last time anyone would see her alive. Within hours, behind the closed door of room 908, something unimaginably dark took place. No one in the surrounding rooms reported hearing any screams or unusual noises. The night passed in an eerie, suffocating silence. In the early hours of the next morning, hotel cameras captured the same man, dragging a large suitcase out of the room. In the dim hallway light, he bent over, straining under its heavy weight. That same elevator, the one Grace had stepped into, smiling just hours before, now carried her lifeless body down to the underground car park. Inside the suitcase, Grace Millane lay curled up, forever gone from the world she had so longed to explore. In that moment, the bright life of a young woman who once dreamed of seeing the world was swallowed by darkness. If it were you, would you feel safe meeting a stranger? A question that once seemed simple, now feels haunting. Because what you've just heard isn't the plot of a horror movie, it's a true story. Try putting yourself in Grace's place that night, a young woman traveling abroad, meeting up with a new friend she'd met online. Everything seemed light-hearted, friendly, perfectly normal. She might have even told herself, "It's fine. It's just a casual meetup." But sometimes a single moment of misplaced trust can change everything. One seemingly harmless invitation can become the doorway to tragedy. What do you think? Were there warning signs Grace might have missed, subtle red flags that only seem obvious in hindsight? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience or intuition might just help someone out there stay alert before it's too late. Grace Millane's heartbreaking story is a sobering reminder of the importance of vigilance in today's digital world, a world where the most dangerous people can hide behind the most perfect facades. A warm smile, a few charming messages, a gentle tone, all of it could be part of a carefully staged act designed to win your trust. If you feel moved by Grace's story and want to help spread awareness, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we'll be sharing more true crime stories like this. Stories where what you learned today might one day save your life. And now, let's step into the full sequence of events in the Grace Millane case, beginning on the night of December 1st, 2018, when the young traveler stepped into the elevator of the City Life Hotel with a man she barely knew. That man's name was Jesse Shane Kempson, 26 years old, a local resident of Auckland. He had suggested meeting Grace at a bar inside the Sky City complex. That evening, Grace wore a simple black dress and a pair of delicate heels, leaving her hostel with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. After all, it was her first time meeting someone from the internet in person and in a foreign country. But she reassured herself. It's just a normal date, nothing to worry about. Across the street, Kempson approached with a seemingly gentle smile. He was tall, soft-spoken, polite, the picture of a considerate man. The two walked together to Andy's Burger and Bar, a well-known spot serving burgers and cocktails. Their conversation flowed easily, the mood relaxed and pleasant. Throughout the evening, Grace texted her best friend, Amina Ashcroft, who was in Dubai at the time. "I'm out with this guy who says he's a manager at an oil company," Grace wrote excitedly. On the other end, Amina frowned for a moment. "A manager at an oil company? That young?" she replied, uneasy. A small flicker of concern crossed her mind, but she didn't want to ruin her friend's night. "Okay, just be careful." Amina texted back, "Keep me updated." After dinner, Kempson suggested continuing the night at a few bars nearby. By then, Auckland's nightlife was in full swing, neon lights glowing, crowds laughing and moving through the streets. They wandered together through the busy downtown, stopped at pubs for a few beers, and exchanged stories about travel and work. Grace gradually felt more comfortable around this friendly stranger. She had no idea that with every step she took that night, she was walking closer to her own disappearance and into one of the most chilling true crime cases New Zealand had ever seen. Kempson spoke fluently, confident, composed, and seemingly knowledgeable. He boasted that he'd once lived in Australia, worked as a supermarket manager, and was soon to start a promising new job with Fonterra, New Zealand's largest dairy company. His words carried a touch of arrogance, but Grace only laughed. She didn't entirely believe him, yet she wasn't looking to question it either. Christmas was just around the corner, music filled the bars, and she simply wanted to enjoy the night. After a few beers and cocktails, Grace began feeling lightheaded. Noticing this, Kempson gently suggested, "Why don't we go back to my place? It's just nearby, you can rest for a bit." Without suspecting anything sinister, she agreed. Kempson had been staying in a studio apartment on the third floor of the City Life Hotel, only a short walk away. At around 9:40 p.m., the hotel's CCTV captured the final image of Grace Millane, alive, her arm resting on Kempson's shoulder as they walked through the lobby and into the elevator together. The doors slid shut, sealing her from the outside world. Across the ocean in England, it was still the afternoon of December 1st. Grace's friends and family were starting to send early birthday messages, knowing that New Zealand was nearly a day ahead, but none of their texts received a reply. Grace, who was usually active online and quick to post updates, suddenly went silent. By the next morning, December 2nd, her roommates at the hostel noticed that her bed was untouched, her luggage unopened. They recalled her mentioning plans to go out with a new friend the previous night. When repeated calls to her phone went unanswered, concern turned to fear. The hostel manager promptly contacted the police. And so, on what should have been her 22nd birthday, Grace Millane was officially reported missing. News of her disappearance spread quickly back to the UK. The Millane family was devastated. Her father, David Millane, tried to stay calm, telling reporters later, maybe she just went somewhere with poor reception, or her phone battery died. But deep down, a father's intuition told him something was terribly wrong. By the morning of December 3, 2018, with still no trace of Grace, her parents reached out to the UK Foreign Office, asking them to coordinate with New Zealand authorities. Within 2 days, on December 5th, the Auckland police launched a large-scale missing person operation, soon upgraded to a homicide investigation. The Auckland Homicide Investigation Team began meticulously reviewing hundreds of hours of CCTV footage across the city's downtown area, retracing Grace's every step from that fateful night. Bit by bit, a clear pattern emerged. In every video, from the bars to the streets to the hotel lobby, Grace appeared with the same man. That man, as investigators soon confirmed, was staying at the very same City Life Hotel in the serviced apartment where Grace Millane had last been seen alive. On December 7th, 2018, Grace's father, David Millane, made the painful decision to fly halfway across the world to New Zealand, hoping to find his missing daughter. The moment he arrived at Auckland International Airport, he went straight to a press conference organized by police, pleading for help from the public. Under the blinding glare of TV cameras, the middle-aged man stood before reporters' eyes sunken from exhaustion, voice trembling with emotion. Our Grace is intelligent, loving, fun, and family-oriented. She just wanted to see the world, and now, all we want is to hear her voice again. In his hands, David held a photograph of Grace, smiling brightly, standing between her mother and two brothers. The room fell silent. His heartfelt plea moved an entire nation. Within hours, hundreds of Auckland residents volunteered to join the search for Grace, a young woman they had never met, yet whose story had touched something deep within them. That same evening, December 7th, as dusk fell over the city, police made a sudden move. They raided room 308 of the City Life Hotel under an emergency search warrant. The man who had last been seen with Grace, the very same from the CCTV footage, was taken into custody for questioning. His identity was quickly confirmed. Jesse Shane Kempson, 26 years old, a New Zealand national staying in a serviced apartment at the hotel. When questioned about Grace, Kempson appeared disturbingly calm. He claimed he had no idea where she was, even pretending to be shocked by the news of her disappearance. During the first interrogation, Kempson gave what seemed like a smooth, reasonable account. He admitted meeting Grace on the night of December 1st, saying they'd had a few cocktails and a pleasant time together. Around 8 o'clock, we left Andy's Burger and Bar and went our separate ways, he said confidently. She walked her way, I walked mine. He added that the two had even planned to meet again the following day. We got along really well, he told investigators. We were going to see each other again at her hostel. According to him, on the morning of December 2nd, Grace's Tinder account suddenly unmatched with his. I thought maybe I said something wrong or made her uncomfortable. I tried to message her again, but she'd unmatched me, he explained casually. Kempson went on to claim that later that night, he'd gone drinking alone on Queen Street, got so drunk he couldn't remember how he made it back to his room. He assumed hotel staff must have helped him upstairs. On the surface, his story sounded ordinary, a short, uneventful date that ended early. But to the trained ears of homicide investigators, something felt off. If everything had truly ended the way Kempson described, then Grace Millane should have been home safe hours ago. And soon, his web of lies began to unravel. Police reviewed the CCTV footage from City Life in painstaking detail, frame by frame. What they discovered destroyed Kempson's story. The video clearly showed that Grace never left him at 8 p.m., as he had claimed. Instead, the final footage, recorded at 9:41 p.m., captured Grace and Kempson together, entering the elevator and riding up to the third floor, where his room was located. After that, Grace Millane was never seen alive again. When confronted with the evidence, Kempson faltered only for a brief moment, then changed his story. He admitted that he had invited Grace back to his room to have a few more drinks, but now claimed that the two had consensual sex and that she had died by accident. It was a story riddled with contradictions. Yet Kempson tried to elaborate, spinning a desperate narrative. After their encounter, he said, he went to take a shower and fell asleep in the bathroom. When he woke up, Grace was lying motionless on the floor, bleeding from her nose, no longer breathing. I panicked, he said. I thought about calling for help, but it looked bad, really bad, so I stopped. The detectives sat in silence. Their experience told them immediately Grace Millane hadn't died by accident. The tremor in his voice, the overly detailed deflections, all pointed to a chilling truth. He was inventing a story to escape justice. Forensic findings would later confirm what really happened. After killing Grace, Kempson sat beside her body for hours. The bruises around her neck revealed that she had been strangled to death. Blood had flowed from her nose, soaking into the carpet. Instead of seeking help, Kempson took out his phone and photographed her corpse, as if documenting a trophy. Then, with her body still lying lifeless in the room, he opened pornographic websites and watched videos continuously. Cold, methodical, unfeeling, far from the panic he would later describe. In the early hours of December 2nd, Kempson began his cover-up. He cleaned the room, scrubbing at the bloodstains that had seeped into the carpet, but they wouldn't come out. He then opened his suitcase, forced Grace's body inside, and locked it shut. The next morning, he left the hotel and went shopping, buying a brand-new, oversized suitcase. CCTV cameras caught him walking calmly through the lobby, carrying the large luggage with a disturbingly blank expression, but he wasn't finished. Kempson also stopped by a supermarket, purchasing bleach, rubber gloves, cleaning cloths, and chewing gum items he thought would mask the smell of blood and chemicals. Soon, the hotel room reeked of bleach, drowning out the scent of death, or so he thought. Yet the most horrifying act was still to come. While Grace's body still lay stuffed in the suitcase inside that bleach-soaked room, Kempson opened Tinder again. He arranged another date. That afternoon, December 2nd, he put on a clean shirt, styled his hair, and went out to meet another woman at a bar in Ponsonby, one of Auckland's upscale neighborhoods. Surveillance footage showed him drinking beer, laughing, and chatting, the very image of a carefree man. The woman later recalled that he seemed confident, charming, and perfectly relaxed. During their conversation, he bragged about his background, saying he had police friends, had managed a supermarket in Australia, and was about to join a major dairy company. Then, as the woman mentioned, she'd once attended a murder trial, Kempson said something that sent chills down her spine. "You know, one small mistake can land a man in prison for life." Almost as if to test her reaction, he continued with a disturbing story, supposedly something he'd heard somewhere. "There was this guy," he said, "who liked a bit of choking during sex, but one time, he took it too far. The girl died. He panicked, tried to revive her, but it was too late. They called it manslaughter." At the time, the woman found the story odd and unsettling, perhaps even perverse. She couldn't have known that what he'd just described in chilling detail was not a hypothetical tale, but a veiled confession from a man who had killed Grace Millane less than 24 hours earlier. Before ending his date, Kempson even pretended to be concerned, warning the woman that police were investigating a number of disappearances in the Waitākere ranges. Then, almost casually, he added, "You know, police dogs can only detect bodies if they're buried deeper than a meter." No one realized it then, but he wasn't sharing a random fact. He was outlining his own plan. By late afternoon, the date ended. Kempson said goodbye to the woman, then drove his rented Toyota back toward the City Life Hotel. He knew he had little time left before someone noticed Grace's absence. That night, December 2nd, hotel CCTV captured him pushing a luggage trolley toward the elevator, stacked with 2 large suitcases. To anyone watching, it looked like an ordinary guest checking out. But one of those suitcases contained Grace Millane's lifeless body, bent and bound inside. At 9:30 p.m., Kempson drove the Toyota out of the hotel's underground parking, disappearing into the night. He drove for hours, leaving central Auckland behind. Around dawn on December 3rd, he stopped at a hardware store on the city's outskirts to purchase a long-handled shovel. As morning light crept over the horizon, he made his way west, following winding back roads toward the Waitākere Ranges, a vast, forested area just outside the city. Finding a secluded stretch of roadside, he dragged the heavy suitcase from the car and down the embankment. Using the shovel, he dug a shallow grave barely half a meter deep. Then he rolled the suitcase in, covered it roughly with soil and stones, and scattered dry branches on top. Satisfied that his work would go unnoticed, Kempson returned to his car, believing that a thin layer of dirt and a few broken twigs would bury his crime forever. By noon that day, he was back in Auckland, continuing his meticulous cover-up. He washed his clothes, bought another suitcase to explain away the missing one, and took the rented car to a car wash, scrubbing every inch: the wheels, the floor mats, even the door crevices. Still uneasy, he drove to Albert Park, where he disposed of the shovel, along with plastic bags, gloves, cleaning cloths, and bottles of bleach, dumping them all into public trash bins. Every movement was calm, deliberate, as if ticking off a to-do list. Back in room 308, the thick smell of bleach clung to the air, mingled with dampness from the stained carpet. Kempson sat quietly in the sterile silence, convinced he had erased every trace. Then, chillingly, he logged back onto Tinder, waiting for new messages as though nothing had happened. But on the night of December 7th, at the police station, the walls finally began to close in. Investigators laid out the CCTV footage before him, timestamps, movements, all fitting together like links in a chain, tightening around his lies. Kempson's once smooth tone began to crack. His story stumbled. Something in his expression shifted. Detective Inspector Scott Beard, a seasoned investigator with a sharp intuition for deceit, made his decision Kempson would be held in custody while they expanded the investigation. That same night, police executed search warrants for room 308 and the rented car. Inside the apartment, the scene had been cleaned, but forensic science misses nothing. When investigators sprayed luminol across the carpet, a large patch glowed faint blue, revealing exactly where blood had seeped into the fibers. In a corner, long strands of brown hair were found matching Grace's. The heavy stench of bleach lingered like a physical echo of guilt. In the trash, a plastic bag contained rubber gloves smeared with reddish stains. Each fragment the glowing traces of blood, the hair, the chemicals formed a coherent chain of evidence. There was no doubt left. Grace Millane had been murdered in room 308, and the man sitting under interrogation, Jesse Shane Kempson, was the one who had done it. As detectives dug deeper, a new lead surfaced from the car rental records. Police discovered that on the morning of December 2nd, just hours after Grace was last seen, Jesse Kempson had rented a red Toyota Corolla. At first glance, the vehicle appeared ordinary when officers found it parked in a lot near the City Life Hotel. But when they opened the trunk, they immediately noticed soil, leaves, and fragments of dry vegetation, the kind typically found in the dense forests on the western outskirts of Auckland. The GPS data from the car revealed an odd route. It had left central Auckland late on the night of December 2nd, traveled west toward the Waitākere Ranges, a mountainous, heavily wooded region, then returned to the city early the next morning. The timing aligned perfectly with the window of Grace's disappearance. Detective Inspector Scott Beard's intuition was clear. Grace's body had been buried somewhere in the Waitākere forest, the very same area Kempson had casually mentioned during his Tinder date. Meanwhile, the investigation unfolded quietly, but the world was already watching. News of Grace Millane's disappearance had spread across New Zealand and quickly around the globe. Television networks, newspapers, and social media flooded with updates. Strangers who had never met Grace held onto a fragile hope that perhaps she was simply lost, cut off somewhere, and would soon be found safe. But the detectives' instincts proved tragically right. On December 8th, police held a press conference to announce what everyone had feared. "We are now treating this case as a homicide investigation. A 26-year-old male has been taken into custody." The brief statement sent shockwaves through New Zealand. Even Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern spoke publicly, expressing her deep sorrow and sympathy for the Millane family. Her voice trembled as she said, "On behalf of New Zealand, I apologize to the family. Your daughter should have been safe here." The following morning, December 9th, 2018, a special search team guided by the GPS trail and fragments of Kempson's statements was dispatched to the Waitākere Ranges, west of Auckland. The terrain was rugged, the forest thick and endless. Officers, forensic experts, and police dogs fanned out along narrow, winding tracks. The task was immense, like searching for a needle in a haystack. Then, just after midday, one of the police dogs picked up a scent near a patch of brush off a quiet roadside. The soil there looked freshly disturbed. When officers began digging, the shovel struck something solid. It was the corner of a suitcase. The forest fell silent. Slowly, they unearthed the rest of it and unzipped the case. Inside lay the body of a young woman, curled tightly in a fetal position, wrapped in a sheet of fabric. The long brown hair, the petite frame, the clothing all matched the description of Grace Millane. No one spoke. Some officers turned away, unable to bear the sight. Grace, the girl whose smile had once brightened social media posts across continents, now lay motionless inside that suitcase, buried beneath cold, wet earth. The message was relayed to headquarters. Body located, believed to be Grace Millane. Everyone knew what that meant, even if they didn't want to accept it. Grace was gone. Her remains were taken to the forensic pathology unit for examination. The next day, her parents, David and Gillian Millane, arrived to formally identify their daughter. When they entered the cold, sterile room and saw Grace's body on the examination table, the weight of reality crushed them. Her mother broke down in uncontrollable sobs. Her father stepped forward, gently kissed Grace's forehead, and whispered through tears, "I'm taking you home now, my darling girl." Even the seasoned detectives, hardened by years of tragedy, lowered their heads in silence. On December 10, 2018, police formally charged Jesse Shane Kempson with murder in the first degree. He was escorted to the Auckland District Court for his initial appearance, as media swarmed outside. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, and citizens across New Zealand and the world watched with a mix of grief and outrage. It was now official. The murder of Grace Millane would go down as one of the most shocking crimes in modern New Zealand history. A story of cruelty that shattered the illusion of safety in a country once known for its peace and kindness. The autopsy results confirmed the investigators' worst fears: Grace Millane had died from manual strangulation. The forensic report revealed she had been choked with sustained pressure for at least 4 to 5 minutes, an unimaginably long and torturous span for any human being. Within 30 seconds, a person would typically lose consciousness. Grace endured minutes of agony and suffocation, fully aware, as her life slipped away. The injuries on her body told a story of brutality and struggle. There were large bruises around her neck, especially on the left side, clear evidence that the killer had used tremendous force, causing deep tissue damage. More than a dozen other bruises marked her arms, shoulders, collarbone, and chest. Forensic pathologists determined these wounds had occurred at the time of death, consistent with being held down, restrained, and fighting desperately for her life. The bruises on her arms showed she tried to resist. The asymmetric marks on her shoulder and chest suggested she was pinned face up as her neck was being compressed. Forensic pathologist Dr. Simon Stables summarized it bluntly: "These injuries cannot be accidental. They demonstrate a prolonged and violent act." Toxicology tests found a moderate level of alcohol in Grace's blood, expected from her drinks that evening, but no trace of drugs or sedatives. In other words, she was fully conscious when the attack occurred, enduring every moment of pain and terror. Then came the digital evidence, a window into the killer's mind. Just hours after her death, Kempson used his phone to search chilling phrases like, "How to dispose of a body? How long does a body take to decompose in the woods? How to hide a body?" He even read an online post that claimed police dogs can't detect a body buried deeper than 1 meter. And that was exactly what he later tried to do: bury Grace's suitcase shallowly in the Waitākere forest, barely half a meter deep. Every clue painted the same picture. Jesse Kempson hadn't panicked. He had calculated. He methodically planned each step: the cleaning supplies, the purchase of a shovel, the disposal route, the attempt to act normal by arranging another Tinder date. His calmness after the killing revealed the truth. This was not a crime of passion, but the work of a cold, manipulative, and dangerous predator. As investigators dug deeper into his past, a disturbing portrait began to emerge. Those who had once lived with Kempson described him as unemployed, alcoholic, volatile, and pathologically dishonest. He fabricated stories about luxury cars, high-paying jobs, and glamorous connections, all to mask a life of failure and deceit. One former flatmate recalled that Kempson often brought women he met online back to the apartment late at night. His behavior was so unsettling that the others started keeping knives beside their beds for protection. When they eventually agreed to evict him, Kempson disappeared, leaving behind a message claiming his mother had just died and that he had to return to Australia. Days later, he crept back to collect his belongings, then sent a threatening text to his former housemates. "I'll destroy every one of your lives." Those who had known him felt a chill when they saw his face on the news. In hindsight, the signs had always been there. And as the court records later revealed, Grace Millane wasn't his only victim. While he was already serving his life sentence for her murder, 2 more women came forward. In 2020, Jessie Kempson was brought back to court to face 2 additional convictions, one for rape and another for domestic violence and sexual assault against previous partners. The evidence was overwhelming. The facade of charm and confidence had finally collapsed, exposing what Jessie Shane Kempson truly was: a compulsive liar, a violent predator, and a remorseless killer hiding behind the mask of an ordinary man. The first of Kempson's prior crimes involved a woman he met through Tinder in April 2018, just 7 months before he met Grace Millane. He had raped her inside an Auckland apartment. The second case exposed a pattern of prolonged domestic abuse and extortion toward a former girlfriend. He repeatedly assaulted her, threatened to kill her if she ever left him, and used emotional manipulation to maintain control. Both cases were tried separately, and Kempson received a combined sentence of more than 10 years in prison, 3.5 years for rape, and 7.5 years for violence and blackmail. The court branded him a constant danger to women, a man driven by violence, control, and deceit. Had these truths surfaced earlier, perhaps Grace Millane would still be alive. The main trial opened on the 4th of November 2019 at the Auckland High Court, attracting immense attention across both New Zealand and the United Kingdom. Throughout the proceedings, Kempson denied all charges. He repeated the same defense he had clung to from the start, claiming that Grace's death was the result of a consensual sexual accident. He and his defense lawyers argued that the pair had engaged in a BDSM-style sexual encounter, insisting that Grace had consented to being choked, and that her death was an accident caused by overenthusiasm. They said he panicked afterward and hid the body out of fear. The defense strategy sparked outrage and disgust. The Millane family sat through the trial in visible pain, while the public condemned the attempt to shame the victim and twist the narrative. No one could accept that this was a mere accident, especially when the facts showed that Kempson had photographed Grace's body, watched pornography afterward, arranged another Tinder date, and methodically bought a suitcase, shovel, and cleaning supplies to hide his crime. Lead prosecutor Robin McCubry presented the case to the jury with precision and clarity. He described Kempson as a man who intentionally strangled Grace to death, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and then went on with his life, as if nothing had happened. What he set out to do, McCubry said before the court, was to find a place to dump her body, nothing more. The prosecution showed the jury a series of chilling CCTV clips, each piece of footage a puzzle piece in the chain of horror. Kempson purchasing the suitcase, buying bleach and cleaning supplies, dragging the heavy luggage down the hotel corridor, visiting a hardware store to buy a shovel. Each frame unfolded like a documentary of his crime. When the footage appeared of him pushing the luggage cart with 2 suitcases, one of which contained Grace's body, the courtroom fell silent. Some people began to cry. In the gallery, Grace's parents leaned into each other, tears streaming down their faces. Later, one juror recalled, "After watching that, none of us had any doubt about his guilt." The prosecution then called key witnesses, women who had survived encounters with Kempson. Among them was the Tinder date he met on the afternoon of December 2nd, just hours after Grace's murder. She recounted how, during their meeting, Kempson told her a disturbing story about a man who had accidentally strangled his girlfriend during sex and hidden the body. Everyone in court knew he wasn't talking about some stranger, he was talking about himself. Another witness, a woman who had dated Kempson months before, gave a trembling testimony. She described how, during intimacy, he had suddenly wrapped his hands around her throat and squeezed violently. She panicked, kicked, and clawed until she managed to escape. When she confronted him, Kempson pretended to be distraught, saying, "Do you think I meant to hurt you?" He then faked illness, claiming he had cancer, even threatening suicide to manipulate her sympathy. When she later heard about Grace Millane's murder, the blood drained from her face, she realized she could have been the one who died that night. Their testimonies shattered any illusion of consent. The jury saw Kempson for what he was, a sexual sadist, a violent predator, and a man who found pleasure in control and fear. After 3 grueling weeks of trial, the truth finally prevailed. On the 22nd of November 2019, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Jesse Shane Kempson was guilty of murder. All 12 jurors agreed after less than 5 hours of deliberation, an unusually swift decision that reflected how overwhelming the evidence was. At the sentencing hearing on the 21st of February 2020, Justice Simon Moore delivered a firm and emotional judgment. This was a brutal and callous murder that took the life of an innocent young woman. He sentenced Kempson to life imprisonment, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. It was a harsh but fitting punishment, one that could never bring Grace back, yet stood as the strongest statement of justice her family could hope for. That day also marked the first time the public saw the face of the killer. No longer shielded by court anonymity, Jesse Kempson appeared before the cameras, a dark-haired young man with blue eyes and an almost gentle face, giving no hint of the horror he had committed. He stood silently, gaze averted, showing no remorse. The mask had finally fallen, revealing not the charming traveler or the eloquent talker he pretended to be, but the cold, calculating murderer who took the life of Grace Millane. On the other side of the screen, Gillian Millane, Grace's mother, appeared via video link from the United Kingdom. Her voice trembled as she fought back tears, staring at the man who had stolen her daughter's life. She said that Grace had died in fear and alone, in the hands of a stranger whose name her family would never even wish to speak. The courtroom fell into complete silence. No one moved. Even the most hardened officers wiped their eyes, as a mother's grief filled the room. Kempson lowered his head, hands clenched tightly, yet not a trace of genuine remorse crossed his face. Outside the courthouse, David Millane faced the press. His face was hollow, eyes swollen and red. He spoke softly, his words weighed down with pain. "The verdict brings us some comfort, but nothing will erase the pain. Our lives have fallen apart since the day Grace was taken from us." He turned away, tears falling as cameras flashed. Meanwhile, in England, friends and relatives gathered to hold a vigil for Grace. Thousands of people lit candles, their flickering flames merging into a sea of light that illuminated the night sky. Across continents, strangers wept for a young woman they'd never met, a symbol of innocence lost too soon. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern also spoke publicly, her voice breaking as she addressed the tragedy. "Your daughter should have been safe here. I'm so sorry." Her heartfelt words resonated deeply, uniting an entire nation in sorrow. New Zealand grieved with the Millane family, their pain became the country's own. Justice had been served, but the loss remained immeasurable. Grace Millane was just 22 years old, an age meant for beginnings, for laughter, for discovery. She was kind, radiant, and endlessly curious, a young woman who only wanted to see the world, meet people, and learn from life. She should have come home with stories and smiles, not in silence. Instead, a single moment of misplaced trust with the wrong person ended her journey forever. The last images of Grace smiling beneath a Christmas tree, her eyes sparkling with joy, became haunting symbols of what was lost. Yet her story did not end in tragedy alone. It became a warning for a generation. After her death, a wave of awareness campaigns swept across New Zealand and the UK, urging people, especially women, to stay safe when meeting someone new online. They were encouraged to share their plans with friends, meet in public places, and most importantly, trust their instincts. If something felt wrong, legal communities worldwide also began pushing back against the rough sex defense, the same claim Kempson had used to justify his crime, condemning it as a manipulative excuse for violence. In this way, the world chose to remember Grace not as a victim, but as a catalyst for change. Her story became a lesson, one written in heartbreak, but read with purpose. To her family and friends, Grace is remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived. Warm, generous, full of light. She lived a short life, but left behind a lasting legacy of compassion and courage. And as her father once said, "Grace was our sunshine, and she will be remembered forever." Thank you for listening to the story of Grace Millane. If it moved you, share your thoughts, because maybe, just maybe, your awareness today could save someone else tomorrow. See you again in another true story, one told not just to bring tears, but to keep others safe in the world. Grace never got to finish exploring.